Welcome back to One Winning Pod. It is opening week, guys and girls. We are here. It is the first week of the season, and we are going to preview the game against the Jets in New York, which is super duper exciting. I can't believe we're back on the grind. It's not the off-season episodes. We are going to be on the preview and recap train. But you know what? This season is going to be a big season for us. One Winning Pod, we had a new name going into this new season, and we also are going to start having more content on YouTube, and we've been teasing about it, and I'm excited to say that we're going to start with the bet stuff that we've been talking about, but Peter has a little bit of something special he wants to share too.
Yeah, so little video series I'll be putting together. Will come out on Friday mornings, looking at video content somewhere between 5 to 10 minutes. For those of you who follow the off-season podcast, you know that I really enjoy doing stuff that looks back at Ravens history and how, certain things fit into that grand scheme. And there's not really time for that during the season. And every now and again, some things pop up. And at least for me and people who look at the game like I do as well, hopefully it's not just me who's interested in these topics, but, usually I'll come up, something will happen during the season and I'll be like, okay, what happened the last time the Ravens were in this situation? Or this Friday, what we're going to talk about is it's a potential matchup between the Ravens and their ex-starting quarterback, Joe Flacco. What about the other times in Ravens history when the Ravens went up against a quarterback who was previously in the organization? There's actually several instances of that, and that's what the first video is going to be about. A topic that's probably too long to fit into the flow of what we do in season, so it'll fit perfectly for the short content. And it's been fun preparing this first one, which I'll be recording soon. So I think it'll be a nice, fun thing to kind of diversify the content that we deliver in season.
Yeah, I'm certainly excited. I think the Peter History Corner that we get from time to time is one of the most unique parts of One Winning Pod. And I think it's going to be really cool to have these little vignettes and also isolated. It wasn't just this random show that happened to have this random thing, the thought of the thing is when we talked about it. It's going to be in a nice little nugget. And I think you're doing with this week one we're playing potentially against Joe Flacco, kind of having it be about that stuff is cool. So it's still kind of fitting with the general narrative of the Ravens. But I'm looking forward to this. This I think is going to be really cool. So you guys can find that at our YouTube channel. One Winning Pod is the same way to find it. So that's super exciting. And also one more thing before we get into the Jets preview. But September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and St. Jude is raising money for this. And a podcast network I really like called Relay FM has been doing this for years. And this year they have an ability to create a sub-campaign to gain money. And I think it'd be really great if the One Winning Pod community were to donate to this great cause. I know this is a time of year where we'll be doing fantasy leagues and have buy-in or other things, and any donation size really helps. So I'll be sharing that link, and I think it'd be really cool if folks choose to donate. Childhood cancer obviously stinks, and St. Jude's been doing a lot of work to improving the life outcomes, and also any kids treated by St. Jude is totally free to the parents. We know how difficult healthcare can be in the United States. So if you're interested in donating, the link will be in the show notes.
And with that, I think we'll get right to it. So, yeah, this, like we said at the top, this is a really interesting matchup against the New York Jets. I know they're a team that, has been a little bit more of a down team the last couple of years, but they've made a few moves this offseason, and they're really a wild card in my opinion. I'm not really sure what, Jets team we're going to see this Sunday. Particularly, when we get into, all of the specific matchups of the position groups, I think there are some real opportunities for the Jets to do some damage against the Ravens, and I think vice versa as well. This isn't a Ravens team, obviously, that we're used to where, everybody's healthy, everybody's firing on all cylinders. There's some significant flaws with this team that could be exploited, for better or worse. And, I'm excited to kind of get into it.
It's a really interesting matchup, exactly for the reason that you said, Chris. The Ravens, we've got some key players coming off injury, some other key players that we're not sure if they're going to suit up or not, mostly talking about Stanley and Dobbins there. And the Jets are, they've got a couple injuries as well. We'll start off right with the one that's made the most headlines is obviously the quarterback position. Zach Wilson suffered, I believe it was a knee sprain in preseason. I know when it happened, there was questions of, is he going to miss the whole season? But it looks like that it's something that he will be able to come back from relatively soon, possibly even start Sunday. Although if you look at Jets media, Jets fan boards throughout online, the overwhelming opinion seems to be that everyone wants Wilson to take another week to just make sure the injury is 100% set to go and not jeopardize the long game. As even though Wilson had an underwhelming rookie season, he still came in with a lot of traits that the Jets organization, obviously like the fan base, is excited for. So, we might see Flacco, we might see Wilson, we might see Mike White. Who knows? I think that the general consensus has been that the media expects Joe Flacco to be the starter, but we're not going to know until the Jets make an official announcement, in my opinion.
Which will probably be 90 minutes before the game when they have to.
Probably, yeah.
Right? Like, let's be honest. I don't foresee getting that clarity. This is an advantage for them. I mean, Harbaugh mentioned that they're preparing for 2 quarterbacks, right? And, that definitely makes for an interesting case, but obviously Joe Flacco is one of the most well-known quarterbacks in this area, and a lot of players kind of have played against him. I don't know. I didn't count the roster of who here played with Joe Flacco, but it has to be a decent amount, maybe like half the roster. So there's some knowledge there of how he is in practice and some of his tendencies. But, honestly, if you look at their offense, right, and even if you just look at their team in general, like what Chris said at the top, they're a sleepy team to maybe be much better this year than you expect. And the reason why is they had a tremendous amount of draft capital at the top of the draft. So they went ahead and they picked at the 4th overall pick, Sauce Gardner. That's obviously a defensive pick, but he was one of the best cornerbacks in the draft. We talked about him in our draft preview. Then they went ahead and drafted Garrett Wilson, an electrifying wide receiver who they're pairing up with the second-year wide receiver, Elijah Moore. And they even have other wide receiver situations up there that Ravens fans are all very aware of. But they have wide receivers there. They went and got Breece Hall in the second, right? Maybe the number 1 running back in this year's class, pass catcher. And another piece that they added to their defense was Jermaine Johnson. So you add all of that. We talked about Jermaine Johnson ad nauseum, right? You add all of that together, right? They drafted what we might think is an extremely good young nucleus. To add into addition, what they got last year was a couple contributors as well. And you're seeing how this rebuild's happening and how the coaching change and general manager, everything that's going on over there might be actually leading to something successful. Obviously, you kind of need a hit on your quarterback, but I think they have a lot of pieces that are to be looked at and considered. And I didn't even mention, they also got Jeremy Ruckert, who is kind of buried right now in their tight end depths, but he was a prospect a lot of people really liked. I remember Jason thought he was a good all-rounder tight end. And they just had a big draft that filled a lot of needs.
Yeah, for sure. One of the positional matchups rather, that I kind of highlighted here, I kind of want to talk about a little bit. You hit on it, Alec, in terms of the wide receiver room. I think that's going to be a big matchup this week. Like you said, Garrett Wilson, drafted pretty high overall. You talked about Elijah Moore as well, had a great rookie season last year. It was a really good pick for the Jets. But they got some other guys too. I mean, Corey Davis can do a little bit of damage. I know, he's not a fan favorite here, at least from a fantasy perspective. Peter has thoughts, but he's productive enough. He can stretch the defense and he can make some plays in the passing game. You have some big body wide receivers outside. You have a guy like Elijah Moore who can kind of be underneath a little bit more. But these are weapons for sure. And I think the big test for the Ravens is going to be, what does the secondary look like? Is Peters able to come back week 1? Is he going to be able to play? Marlowe, we're assuming he's probably good to go. But there are a lot of new faces for the Ravens secondary. And although we're excited to see the safety play from a lot of our new players, Marcus Williams, Kyle Hamilton, and a couple of the rookies, it's definitely a question mark. We've only seen a little bit of them, and only a few of them we've only seen in the preseason. So we're not sure how they're going to fare game 1. So I definitely think that's a risk. And the other thing to keep in mind too, we talk about Joe Flacco, and we're all excited for the matchup, and we're excited to see Joe again. I would think that most Ravens fans probably think that, our team is just better at this point, and we've, kind of seen the best of Joe in the rearview mirror. But I mean, heck, dude, he can still sling that football anywhere over the football field. So, I mean, if you've got guys who can run all over the field, get over the top of the defense, and you've got Joe who can still throw a beautiful deep ball when he can, when the O-line holds up, there are only a few plays that can happen and it can totally break apart this defense. I mean, if you want an example, go to the 2020 playoff game against the Titans where our secondary just looked atrocious. They were getting beat on deep plays. That's kind of the margin for error here between this matchup. If Joe makes a few of those plays deep, gets a few touchdowns, that could be significant for this game.
There's so much to look at with this matchup that does give you pause as a Ravens fan. It's easy to look at this game and say, like, okay, they're going against the Jets. This team finished 4-13 last year. They had, by almost all metrics, one of the worst defenses in the league. And we'll get to the defense because they have made some improvements on that side of the ball in the offseason beyond just the high draft capital that they had. But this offense is filled with playmakers. It's a great test for Mike McDonald, his first game with the defense. It's a great test for the guys coming back from injury to see how they stand up. I think we could see Marcus Williams have to play some defense and make some plays in the back end because they got guys who can burn you. Garrett Wilson, huge speed. Elijah Moore is not slow either. So, and we're seeing it right now with the Orioles, right? These teams that have a plan, and the Jets, they seem to have a plan. They've made a ton of moves to bring in the guys, supposedly, that Robert Saleh wants to be his guys on this franchise. That can sneak up on teams who aren't paying attention. I remember this time last year, not quite this time last year, but Labor Day weekend last year, I was I wasn't in. I was at a wedding in LA, and I was out on the beach, just wearing my Orioles cap, and I was getting some grief from people. They were just like, "Oh man, dedicated fan, they're so sorry, man." Just like, and I'm just thinking to myself the whole time, I'm like, guys, they got a plan. I don't know if it's this coming season, but 2-3 years from now, it's going to be looking pretty good. And we're just already seeing the fruits of that this season, aren't we, with the Orioles? Even though at the time of recording, we've had a little bit of a lumpy weekend with them, but maybe this is the year the Jets start showing some signs. Maybe they're a couple seasons away. I think that this is... I don't think this would be a trap game necessarily for the Ravens because, this team hasn't won since before last Thanksgiving. I think they're hungry for a win. That being said, the Jets might make them work harder for it than we would have thought last year.
They're going to make us work harder for it than I thought even a couple days ago before I started really preparing for this, because I started looking at all the things that they've done, and I'm starting to buy into the fact that they're going to be a competent team this year. And, obviously it really comes down to Zach Wilson's play for the long-term view of them, like we said earlier. But with Joe Flacco, if Joe Flacco is a starter, I'm a little bit more nervous than I would be, just given this single game matchup. I think it's going to be a bit tougher of a game than maybe fans are expecting. And it's also because they're seeming to do it right? Obviously, they had that really gruesome injury in the preseason, losing Mekhi Becton, their tackle. They drafted highly in 2020. But next to him at right guard is their highly drafted last year, Vera Tucker. And he was a guard prospect we all thought would be quite good. And you kind of see how they're building the wall, so to speak, around whoever their quarterback is. You obviously have Breece Hall added to Michael Carter, who they got last year. No one knows Denzel Mims, the second-round pick that they stole from the Ravens, quote-unquote. At least a lot of Ravens fans felt that way. But the other second-round pick of Elijah Moore, like we said, he seems like he might be the real deal. And we'll see what Wilson adds. There's just a lot of pieces here on the offensive side of the ball to say, okay, this is coming together. Because you could see next year being like, dang, they have a really good offense if a couple things fall the right way. And yeah, I think you look at it, right, from a Ravens perspective. Okay, our new defense, pass rush, outside linebackers, which Chris, shameless plug, just talked about with Ken, the outside linebacker group, going against this offensive line. Are they going to be able to get the pressure, right, with the defensive line help? Are we going to be able to disrupt their offensive game plan? And I think that's something really worth seeing in this first game.
I mean, yeah, to directly answer that question, I think for that matchup, you got to get interior pressure. I'd say, fortunately, Joe is not as mobile as he used to be.
Yeah.
I'm not so worried about OA crashing off the edge. I'm more, worried like, can Calais and Pearson, all those guys kind of crash the pocket up the middle? Because, I mean, historically, I think any quarterback is not really going to perform very well when they have pressure and consistent pressure in your face. We know that Flacco's one of his worst tendencies, I think, has been to throw off his back foot, and that can happen a lot if he's backpedaling because of pressure up the middle. So, for me, like, if the Ravens are going to have success, it's got to start with pass rush up front. Having one rush linebacker and one Sam linebacker on your roster right now, regardless of how well Houston and OA perform, that's just a lot to ask from those two guys to play 100% of snaps. But yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a key is to see how much pressure they're able to get, at least on the inside, and what's Mike Donald going to bring? Is he going to, have some simulated pressures? Is he going to try to bring an extra linebacker, an extra safety? Where are they going to come from? Things like that. There are a lot of other pieces to kind of compensate for it, but it's going to require new stuff that we just haven't seen before.
I think another thing, not really, super strategy based, but something we saw more than we would have liked in Flacco's later years in Baltimore was balls batted at the line of scrimmage. And we know that's something that Calais Campbell, all 6'8" of him, is pretty good at doing. Those plays are more luck and timing, certainly. The defensive line reading the quarterback, what he's going to do. But that's something that if Flacco is the starter, we could maybe see a tip ball or two from Campbell, which could translate into a turnover. We talked about how last year the Jets, 4-13, didn't win any games by more than 7 points of those 4 wins. One of the big things that they had an issue with was turnovers, 20 interceptions from their quarterbacks. That was, I think, tied for second worst in the league. And we know that that's something that the Ravens want to try and do. For the past few seasons, it's felt like that turnovers has been a big focus of this defense, as it should be for any team, but turnovers have been hard to come by in certain seasons. This is a great game to get started on the right foot for them. If they're able to draw up the right coverages, right scheme. This is a game where, like Chris is saying, if you get pressure on Flacco, if you get pressure on Wilson, heck, they will have a tendency to maybe rush a throw. Flacco, maybe he'll dump the ball into the flat without really looking where the defender is. We know that's somewhere he could get a interception off of him. Heck, that happened in the preseason game that Flacco did play this year. So that's one way to stop any potential upset that the Jets could bring with this new talent, is to get a good step in the turnover battle. And this is a team that, again, not to weight too heavily on last year, but it seems like there will be opportunities there if the Ravens are able to take advantage of them.
I think on the flip side, another matchup that I'm really interested in, kind of shifting from the Ravens defensive line, but over to the Jets defensive line. If I'm the Ravens, I think Jets defensive line is really interesting, and I'm really curious just kind of what some of the new acquisitions are going to do to really transform this group. Last year, 2021, I think their defensive line was pretty good from a pass rush perspective. I think they have a lot of guys that could get after the quarterback. They run like this sort of 4 defensive line, sort of like base defense out of. So I mean, you can call it 4-3, you can call it like a 4-2 knuckle, whatever you want to call it. But they have 4 guys that they like to put on the defensive line. And, they're generally like a little bit undersized. They're not kind of the Michael Pierces or, Brandon Williams that the Ravens like to play, that because of their 3-4 scheme. But they have a bunch of smaller guys, but they are really fast, they're really strong, and they perform really well in the pass rush department. I think that's anchored by Quinnen Williams, who's a 4th-year player. Jets fans are really excited about him and what he can bring. He had 6 sacks last year, which is pretty good as an interior lineman. And then you have some other guys as well. Franklin Myers was another guy. I think he plays defensive end in maybe their scheme. He had another 6 sacks last year as a Jet as well. But yeah, I think if I were the Ravens, I think the worst thing that you can get right now is to have like pure passing situations where they can kind of unleash those guys and then just play on the back end. Obviously, Alec, you mentioned earlier, like they brought in guys like Sauce Gardner, and they have more guys on the back end that can cover. And, while Lamar's Lamar, I think he's going to feast no matter what. I think, putting him in worse positions where you can have those guys cover and they can bring pass rush and get home with 4. Lamar can make things happen, but not all the time, right? Sometimes, you just get stuck in the pocket or, whatever happens. I think that's the worst case scenario for the Ravens, is that if they have to play to that. One thing that they were weaker on last year, not so good defending the run. I think they were in the bottom 10, bottom 15, at least bottom half of the league in terms of run defense. Now, I think some things that they did to bring in, they brought in 2 free agents. I believe somebody from the Rams, and then they brought in Solomon Thomas, who used to play for the 49ers. I think he was with the Raiders last year as well. We'll see what that happens. I'm a little curious just because the guys that they brought in too are a little bit undersized playing on the interior. So I don't know if they're, if you're talking about the Ravens rush defense, if you're talking about the Ravens rush offense and, they've relied on these bigger guys to kind of play their man rushing scheme, I feel like the Jets kind of lose that matchup. The guys that they have playing there they're just too undersized. And, while, I'm sure that they can make plays, they can move some guys around. I feel like if the Ravens kind of can get the run game going and can kind of wear them down in the second half, I think that would kind of lean in their favor.
So you're looking at 2 third overall picks with Solomon Thomas and Quinn Williams on that defensive line, right? So yeah, you can kind of see why they have talent. And I am a bit concerned, but I guess a little bit excited by what you're saying there, Chris, as far as them being a little undersized. So we know the Ravens have basically a mammoth offensive line, except for Linderbaum. And but he has his elephants, as Ken liked to call him. I thought that was pretty funny. The elephants next to him. And we'll see, who our left guard is out of Powers in Cleveland. But I think both of them are going to be capable of getting the necessary push in the run game. I'm actually really excited to see this offensive line and how they're able to generate a run game, because we really didn't see it in the preseason, but they also weren't playing any of the starters except for maybe, Linderbaum and maybe the left guard, right? So getting the whole picture together will be really useful. And I guess maybe brings up the Stanley conversation. I don't know what we're going to see this week, but I'm not too worried about it as far as this week goes, because I think with the game plan for the Ravens, I think it will be to get the run game going in some capacity and kind of feeding off that with the pass game. I don't think we need to or almost want to generate particularly super long plays against this team. I think it might be advantageous to get the ball out a little bit faster and get playmakers, kind of set them up for success against this coverage. And yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm thinking with this game plan.
Yeah, I think both teams are interested to see, or both fan bases, I should say, are interested to see how their respective offenses are able to establish the run in this game. Obviously, you touched, Alec, on the relative ineffectiveness of the offensive line in the preseason for the Ravens to generate a run game. Well, the Jets fans had the same takeaway from their offensive line for their preseason. Now, theirs is a little bit different. Again, we talked about they have the injury to their right tackle, who unfortunately lost last year as well. So that's really tough for them, for a guy who's only in his third year, former 11th overall pick. But they're not feeling super great about the tackles, from what I could tell from the fan base. Varying opinions on that, which usually means that is a position group that defense might be able to take advantage of. But going back to the Ravens, I'm really interested to see what happens with the left side of this line, and I wonder if the Jets will try and give that a little more of a focus in their scheme. Zeitler's obviously the guy we're going to feel best about going into this game. He's the vet. He's healthy. He's good to go. Linderbaum will be his first game. You got Moses there too. So the Jets do know him because he was there last year. But you got to feel a little worried on the left side. Well, I shouldn't say worried, but you're not feeling as confident as you like with Powers. Obviously, we've talked ad nauseum about they had him all over the line in the preseason. And left tackle, I don't think we know if Ronnie Stanley's going to be there week one. Now, Jawan James was serviceable in the preseason, but how confident do we feel there? So it's interesting. I'm not sure yet how I feel yet about this defense going up against the Ravens offense, but I will say I did notice in watching some film last year of, at least when we're talking about a pass protection standpoint, what the Ravens will have to do, it seemed like the Jets, they relied a lot more on athleticism than technique to get sacks, and you did notice a lot of interior sacks, a lot of being able to blitz up the middle. C.J. Mosley was doing some of that, and their defensive tackles were getting some push there as well. So that would put more emphasis on the guards and center, I would think, in those situations to get the protection done there. But yeah, it's a really tough matchup to project what's going to happen. Again, like we're saying, because of the new players, and just we're not 100% certain what we're going to get from the left side of this offensive line come kickoff.
One thing I wanted to add to my original point about the offense here, and is the game plan. I feel like it can't be too complicated because this is essentially their first game. It's their preseason game. It's their warm up. They haven't been able to get that opportunity. So I think we will expect a simpler deployment of the offense this week. And also because we're still waiting for everything to come online. JK is booting up. Who knows what his stats will be for week 1 until 90 minutes before, right? I'm confident we will not know. And even if he is active, how much he's going to play, what's his pitch count, et cetera. And then you got, Stanley and Lamar hasn't been out there. Bateman has seen no action. Heck, half our wide receivers that are actually on the active roster saw no action because they were hurt during the preseason. So you're just coming into this as a very fresh group that hasn't really had an opportunity to play against anyone else. So I think we'll see a relatively simple, bland offensive plan. And I wouldn't be worried if the offense comes out a little cold this game. I think that's okay. And I think it could almost be by design. So I think we're hoping that they do enough to win. They win competently. And that's about it. I don't, remember the Dolphins game where we just beat up on them and we were throwing these bombs and I don't expect that. It'd be cool if it happened, but I don't expect us to just be whooping up on this team and driving up the score and having the typical John Harbaugh week 1 demolition tour. I think it might be a little bit more reserved, but I do hope it's a competent win and just a calming win almost. Okay, things look stable and we can build off of it for week 2.
Right. That kind of goes back to, I think, what Peter was saying about some of the guys kind of on the Jets defensive line relying more on athleticism and less on just kind of bullying you or beating you up or anything, right? As long as the Ravens offensive line can do their jobs and not, play good technique and try not to let guys get a clean shot at Lamar, right? Mm-hmm. Even Lamar might take some sacks. It just might happen. He's not, again, he's although he is Houdini, there are just some plays that it just happens, right? He just goes into them. He takes there's some good sacks to take. It's possible, right? But as long as you're not taking clean shots to him and really making us worried, just do your job, try to keep him clean, and then just get out of there with the win would be number one. The other thing I did want to mention before we kind of move on to another position group, Peter, you mentioned about just at least last year the Jets getting more of a push on the inside. I will say this year, 2 guys we haven't mentioned, or I guess 1 guy we did, the other guy we didn't. Carl Lawson, who actually played for the Bengals for a number of years. He was signed by the Jets last year. I believe he had a torn Achilles or ACL early in the year, so he actually did not play for them pretty much at all last year. So he is back, and he should be playing week 1. So we'll see what he provides. He'd be playing on one of the defensive ends, so he'd be playing, across the tackles. So I'm sure, if Stanley plays or whomever plays, they're probably familiar with him with his time with the Bengals. So he's there. And then, Alec, you mentioned him before, Jermaine Johnson, rookie that they drafted with their 3rd first-round pick this year. He's going to be one of those guys who's also lining up in those defensive end roles on the outside. So from the scouting report that we did, he's another guy who kind of relies, heavily on athleticism. He's just a really big, really strong guy, kind of a physical freak. So we'll see what he provides. I want to say that I'm excited to kind of see him because I did a lot of draft studying on him, but I'm also not. So we'll see.
I think that gets to a better point, Chris, of like we're allowed to be excited to see how some of these players play that we've had maybe interest in the draft, or obviously Joe Flacco being our quarterback for a decade. We are allowed to be interested and rooting for these things almost. And that's why I said a competent win. Like, I'm okay if the Jets do some good things. I'm okay if they have they make our team not look totally dominant. I think that's acceptable and fine. And I think it's acceptable and fine for the Ravens to have that expectation too of this might not be the most it's the first game in the season. So there'll be some growing pains if the defense isn't flying off the page and you're like, Mike McDonald's a failure. Come on, calm down. That's kind of what I'm getting at. This is all going to be very new and very fresh for this team and for both sides. And week one's chaos, right? When we talk about the betting lines, if you look at it, there's always a lot of chaos on week one because no one knows. It'll get clear in a couple weeks, but this first week of the season is very interesting.
It is, yeah. Although I will take a slightly different take that you took. I understand the intrigue with a lot of these guys on the Jets for just a general fandom perspective, but man, I don't want the Jets to do anything in week one. I want them to just fail at everything and just be so ticked off that they just go out the next 3 weeks and are just like wild Vikings against the Browns, Bengals, and Steelers and just go on a 3-game win streak, man. I think that's the best timeline. We can do all our rooting. We get to do all our rooting for the Jets in weeks 2 through 4. We don't need to do any rooting, soft golf clap for them if they score a touchdown. Not saying that's the take you have to go by, but that's the way I see it.
I like it, Peter. That's acceptable.
I appreciate the honesty. Got to keep us grounded, Peter.
That's right. We're all patting the Jets on the head and giving them cookies until it's halftime and they're up 17-6. Anyways,
I appreciate you all.
Well, the good news is I think we're going to be scoring a little bit more than 6 points because we have a guy named Mark Andrews on our team, which brings me to the next matchup that I'd like to talk about. It'd be the easy to just say Ravens wide receivers versus the Jets secondary, but I'm not interested in that so much. I'm interested in how the Ravens tight ends match up against linebackers and secondary for the Jets. I think it was a weakness for this team last year. The Jets had trouble covering tight ends. And, I'm with a guy like Mark Andrews had a fantastic season last year. I think he's going to feast with another guy, Isaiah Likely, who's, looking as much as, the offseason. I did not imagine this. He is looking to be a significant weapon in this offense right now. We'll see how much he can contribute week one. But, I think between both those guys, I think that's going to cause a lot of fits for the Jets defense. I'll say, a lot of fans, I thought, did not think that CJ Mosley was that good in pass coverage. I kind of disagree. When he was here in Baltimore, I thought he was above average and he was overall one of the best, middle linebackers that the Ravens have had. He was pretty good. He wasn't great. He wasn't the best of all time. He wasn't the GOAT, but he was pretty dang good. That being said, he's been out of football. I think he opted out of the COVID year, he got hurt in 2019, then opted out the COVID year. He did play last year. So he's played a little bit of football, kind of was able to come back healthy. But that being said, it's been a long time since he's been a Raven. He's a little bit older now. I don't know what he's going to bring in terms of being coverage ability for a guy like Mark Andrews. Is he going to be the guy who's primarily assigned to cover him? Are they going to put some sort of safety on Andrews? Are they going to double him? I don't know, but they better have an answer for him because I think he is definitely going to be the mismatch that the Ravens are looking to exploit. As far as guys on the outside, Rashad, Bateman, we're excited for, but he's been going against Sauce Gardner or, one of the other Jets cornerbacks. I think that matchup might be a little bit more unfavorable. But Mark Andrews, all day, every day, I think at the very least, he's going to get us more than 6 points by halftime.
Yeah, CJ Mosley is another interesting piece of this. Sat out the COVID year, so now he had kind of that year off and is back. Kind of his second season now, I guess, with the Jets. They did the restructure of his contract. I think that's a really good point, Chris. Of what CJ Mosley are we going to see, and how is he going to be able to line up against the Isaiah Likeleys and Mark Andrews of the world?
It's an interesting matchup. It'll also be interesting to see what the Ravens, what the plan is when Lamar's back to pass. Again, this is going to be the first time he's going to be seeing game action since that game in Cleveland last year. Grand scheme of things, he didn't miss that much time, but still, he didn't play in the preseason. That's $1 million question right now. The debate going on is how much time should starters play in the preseason? Should they play at all? You saw that the Chiefs felt that Patrick Mahomes needed to go out there and torch second-string defenses, I guess, to get some rapport with the new receivers. I don't know. But a lot of teams, they weren't playing their starters at all, especially the quarterbacks. Is there going to be any timing issues there getting back up to game speed? I would think not, but again, it's still something to keep an eye on. And we did see in the training camp practice that was open up to public, Lamar targeting Andrews a lot. And considering this will be Lamar's first game back from the injury, and he hasn't played terribly much with Bateman or the rest of these guys, I could see him wanting to go to Andrews a lot. So I fully agree. I think that it projects that that's going to be what it is, but if we're thinking that, I'm imagining the Jets are going to think that as well. So it'll be interesting to see what their scheme will be. Will they put too much protection on him and force us to have to go to some of the other guys, or will it be enough that he'll be open? Because Mark Andrews, end of the second half of last year, he reached another level where he was able to more consistently beat those double coverages and win those contested balls. I think a great play last year that really showed some growth in his game was that touchdown pass. He might have had 2 touchdown catches in the game against Cincinnati. I'm not remembering, but the one where he was taking the shallow slant from the right to left, and the way he drew that linebacker and to get himself open there in the corner of the end zone, that was a play that the best players in the league make that play, and that's where he is. And I know we're talking a lot about who's a wide receiver one for the Ravens. Maybe it's Bateman, but right now it's Mark Andrews. So I think we should expect that he'll be the one drawing the most targets. But I do hope that the Ravens do give Bateman a chance against Gardner, because that's going to be a matchup of 2 great players. 2 players are going to be great in this league, and let's give Bateman a shot. Let's see what he can do against this guy. See if he can win contested catches against him. We'll see what they want to do, but I would love to see Bateman get in some strong work against Gardner. I think that would set him up really well for the rest of the season to get started out and win some tough grabs against a top prospect in this league. Another thing you look at with the Ravens in this game, if we want to talk about the offense going against this defense, is just running backs. Who's it going to be? How are the carries going to be distributed? I don't think we can really say. We're questioning, is Dobbins even going to play? If he does play, how many snaps are they going to give him? You got Mike Davis back there. He was getting first-team reps in the preseason, so you would think that he's in their plans. They signed Kenyon Drake. Tyler Beatty was signed to the team after he was initially cut. Justice Hill is on the team, I believe. Maybe practice squad.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The testosterone is flowing, dude. They got so many running backs. They went and got Kenyon Drake since the last time we recorded. He was a darling for everybody in Arizona and went over to the Rams, didn't do too much, and now he's here. Does he have juice? I don't know. I mean, every highlight I've seen of the man, it was in pass catching, which is I guess cool and all, but Lamar doesn't check down to the running back often, so maybe that's part of the new 20% of the vault that's getting released, from Roman's offense. But I don't know. How does it all work? I have no idea, man. You bring up a very good point. And that's the other thing, too, that's kind of weird. We can say this about the whole team and how they're kind of recovering from these injuries, getting online. Us seeing the full game plan of what this team's going to look like or what they want it to look like by season's end, cannot and will not happen week 1. It just can't, because everything's not there yet. So we'll see how the Ravens are able to adjust and what they're able to introduce. But to kind of go off your earlier point of seeing Bateman thrive against Sauce, yeah, of course, that sounds fantastic, and we'll need that, because then there's so many good corners that he's going to go against during this year. He's going to be seeing the number 1 coverage, and yeah, this is a great first test for him. And similarly with the running game, the athletic defensive line that we talked about going to be able to stop the run that the Ravens are trying to do, and will they have the juice? Like, I think the biggest thing that was missing last year was the threat of the outside edge with Lamar, and then also just the overall blocking. I think we're going to have 2 improvements there, week 1 compared to last year, and even if you assume Dobbins is not online, I have more confidence in the running backs they do have this year, having the juice to show that. I mean, Justice Hill was showing athleticism during the preseason, and yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and I think week 1 will mean nothing about week 2 and 3. Like, that's the funny part, is like we can't predict week 1, and I honestly don't think that week 1 will give us much more of a lens in the week 2. Like, I think it's going to be a flowing situation as health improves or worsens. Maybe somebody else gets nicked up, right? Like, it's going to be hard to predict this for a while.
That's an interesting point, Alec. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about that, but now that you mention it, I think that's a good element of the running game that I'd kind of like to see is, who the Ravens decide to kind of want to be able to stretch that outside edge. Like I said earlier, I mean, the Jets are bringing back Lawson, and they have in Jermaine Johnson. Both those guys can set the edge, but I think if you are the Ravens, test that. Are they able to do that? Because I think that's one way to kind of tire out a very athletic defensive line is make them run laterally, make them run a lot, be able to like stretch the outside a little bit, and see how well can they set the edge. I think the Ravens have enough players, even outside of Dobbins. I think they probably could do it, but it might not be a bad idea to kind of try that out this first week, considering it's just who's available, and even Lamar can do it if we need to. If we need to have Mike Davis or anybody else kind of handle the inside runs, Lamar takes the outside. Like, that's an option. Those are things that can help for sure in this matchup. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like all signs with Dobbins though. I feel like I would be surprised. Like, I think he would be on snap count, but I would be surprised if it's like primarily like the Mike Davis, like Justice Hill show. Like, I feel like maybe Dobbins is closer out of all the other players, and that it wouldn't be that much of a surprise for me if he had, like, I don't know, 40% of the snaps or something.
I buy that. I think it's fair. Yeah, I think this is going to be the most excited I've been for a game book in a while, to see the final snap counts and like look at everyone's averages. I always like looking at the game book. It's always an interesting lens of the game, but this is particularly interesting. And also like with formations, right? Like, we haven't even talked about really like how are they going to deploy Likely? How are they going to use Boyle? Like, all these tight ends. Like, is Josh Oliver going to be activated and on the field? Like, another shocker of our 53-man predictions of like, this man is here. Like, there's a lot of interesting questions about personnel deployment. So we'll see a little bit of it week 1, obviously, and kind of go from there. I do think though it's time for the segment we've all been waiting for. Can we get some bold predictions?
I'll go first because this one popped into my head early this morning. I like it. I think, again, we talked about how Flacco, if he gets pressured, he can throw it sometimes into the flat, or even, sometimes he's in a groove, and those outs, the ball will be a little behind, a little late, and I think that will be dangerous territory for him to throw into based on what we saw out of Pepe Williams in the Arizona game. If they want to deploy him like they did there, I could see him getting his first NFL interception in week 1. That's the bold prediction that I'm going to make.
I'll go next. Yeah, I kind of like that one, Peter. I had a very similar one. I figure I'll go with this. I think the Ravens are going to come away with at least 2 interceptions. I like Marcus Williams to get 1. And as far as the second one, for sake of this, I'm not going to say Pepe, but I'll say Marcus Williams, and I'll say Kyle Hamilton get their first interception of the season.
The interception fest.
Well, like we said, they did finish second worst in the league last year.
Here's my bold prediction that's going to either could be wrong before the game even starts. I think J.K. Dobbins plays and he pops off a 50-plus yard run. And I think he throws the middle finger at Ian Rappaport. Obviously, I'm trying to basically manifest this, but that's my guess. Is no matter what, he's gonna show that explosion in the first game. I feel like I'm setting myself for failure by saying the 50-yard run, but I think he's just gonna get past him. Like I see it if he plays. I think the first game he plays, he's gonna be so amped up to prove something because that's just like the character that he is. That if there's even a semblance of a hole or something, he will will it into happening. So he was also like deprived of that his rookie season. He just didn't have that long getaway run until like the very last game, right, of the regular season. And we were all like, when is he going to have that monster? Like he had explosive runs, but he just didn't have that monster run. I think he's going to come out from this injury with a vengeance. I'll be really ticked off if like he does it from like the R40 and like runs it in. It's only a 40-yard run. He clearly could have gotten like another 80, you know? If he was all the way in the back. I'll be so mad. Maybe I should change it to like has a run, like a clear like the whole defense is behind him run.
Oh man,
breakaway run. I don't know. It is
none of us are going out with the bold prediction that Ronnie Stanley suits up.
Absolutely not. That's too bold for me.
I think that is too bold. However, I will say that if this was not week 1, but for some reason, like postseason game 1, he'd be out there. This is totally. They're playing the long game after what happened last time, but I think if it was like a more important game, so to speak, he'd be out there. That's my hunch. My thought is that the man has been practicing behind closed doors for a lot longer than they've been letting on. Because there's no reason to show him to the media. Like, that was just to quiet down the fans. Right? Like, who cares?
Sure.
Obviously, that's like that is reps of practice time that he'd be missing. If you don't do that, that is like, you know, the overall practice time. But like, there's plenty of practice the media doesn't see. And there has been for weeks. So, I don't know. Wouldn't be shocked if he was practicing for a while. I'm pretty sure part of rehab is practice. Maybe I'm crazy. Let's get into those score predictions. I can start if that's cool with everybody.
Yeah, let's sneak it around.
This is my score prediction, kind of going back with the conservative game plan and a little bit of Jets success. I'm going to say the Jets are able to put on a respectable performance, putting up 13 points, and we're going to put up 24. Oh, that means they cover. The spread's 6.5 for the Ravens. Although I think the sharp bet's to say the Ravens don't cover. Teaser for the actual episode. My score prediction and what I think might actually be the smart bet are different things.
I think you kind of hinted that already with saying, you know, the conservative, probably going to be a conservative game. I'm going to take a similar route and go with a score that would infuriate the bettors, but we're going to say Ravens 23-17.
Oh yeah, and it's like a garbage like touchdown at the end or something.
For the Jets, yeah,
like 23-10, and then they like get a garbage time touchdown or something. Yeah.
All right. What the heck? I'm just gonna throw this out there. It's kind of a bold prediction, but what the heck? Week 1, new season, new possibilities. I'm gonna say Ravens 22-18. And why is it 22, you ask? Well, they score a last-minute touchdown. They decide to go for 2, and they get it. 22-18. That would really shut everybody up from last year. Why do you go for 2? It never works.
So they're going to kick like, I'm curious how this works. So they kick like 6 field goals to get the 18? How the Jets gain 18?
That's a good question.
Field goals, you said it right there.
Or they miss an extra
Legatron now.
They miss an extra point attempt.
Yeah, no, that could happen.
Yeah, anything could happen. They were really reading up on the analytics, and they decided they're going to go for 2 every time. Kickers are canceled.
I didn't think that would be the most interesting part of the score prediction. But yeah.
Well, that's what
it could be. Yeah.
Isn't that what the Ravens did against the Chiefs last year? They were like, we're going to have to keep up with them. We're going for 2 the first time. Like, it is what it is. Maybe the Jets are like, sure, the Ravens are pretty darn good. Maybe we should try to get points when we can.
Also, another thing, the Ravens did 6 field goals against Detroit, 2013, including Justin Tucker's, at that time, record breaker.
Right.
For indoor game, at least, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That's another way you can get to 18. 6 field goals. The math adds up.
Oh, man.
Peter, I think I just gave you an idea for another 5-minute video for that new segment you're launching.
I do have a Justin Tucker one in the works. If I'll just say there's a way I could see the topic I would want to do with Justin Tucker could work if certain events happen this season. So that's a possibility for an episode.
Including my score prediction, which means I'd be 1-0 for the season, and you get a new pod topic. It'd be great.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, that was a lot of fun. Great to get back in the swing of things for our bold predictions, our preview show. I think the Jets are obviously an improving team, and I'm excited to see how the Ravens are able to handle them and what the game plan is going into week 1. We'll have some analysis for you of how this game goes next week, and have our next preview episode of the home opener against Miami. But in the meantime, like you said, go ahead and subscribe to that YouTube channel. Check out the history lesson that Peter's going to give you each Friday, and check out our bets. Maybe it'll help you create your bets. Oh, breaking news, by the way. I saw a tweet today from Larry Hogan, if you live in Maryland, that apparently things are actually happening with online betting. And, it is conceivable by the end of the year that we will actually have this product, finally. So you will be able to place your bets and not make casino. And from the toilet, as nature intended. So go ahead and get excited about bets and the Ravens season, and we'll see you next week.